Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Hassan Adil, and today I'll be going through a quick overview for planning your admission into medical universities in UK. So the first thing to talk about is what you need to consider. So there are a few main things to consider when you're applying. You have your personal statement, which you'll put in through UCAS. You have your GCSE grades and your predicted A-level results, which you should have around now, if not over the next few weeks. And these grades are quite important for some universities, depending on some of their weightings. And other things to consider are your entrance exams. So many of you will have already done your UCAT exam. The UCAT's applicable to about 30 universities, and as I'm sure you know, you have a maximum score of 3,600, and you're also given a band 1 through 4 for your situational judgment. Regarding the UCAT, some universities will weigh the UCAT based on your percentile, basically, or your score, and they'll rank the applicants, and they'll have a cutoff point. So for example, Sheffield has on their website, they have a minimum requirement of 2430 in the UCAT for application. However, the actual cutoff point in reality was 2780. So that's something to look out for regarding the UCAT cutoff. Other universities, for example, Liverpool, as I have here, they use a scoring system. So Liverpool give points based on some of your GCSE grades, 9 of your GCSE grades, and it'll give you a score based on your UCAT score in certain intervals, and then those points will be added together in a weighting of 25% to your GCSE and 75% to the UCAT. The other entrance exam is the BMAT. This is for 8 universities for home students, and Manchester University may ask international students to take it as well. And generally speaking, for these universities, they'll add the score together of each section, so 9 points in sections 1 and 2, and then 5 points for section 3, or 10 points if they include the quality of written English. So then based on that score, some universities use cutoffs, and others will determine only based on sections 1 or 2, and others may give a more holistic view. Now, another thing you need to know is totals. How many seats are there that you're applying for? So as of this year, for the current intake of medical students, there is about 10,500 seats that have been taken. So here we have some totals for just some different regions. So majority are in England, of which there's about 8,500 students, about 300 in Northern Ireland, 1,300 in Scotland, and about 450 in Wales. And this information I've gotten from this website, officeforstudents.org, and they have a Excel spreadsheet which details more about the different universities. Another thing to point out is this graduate entry, which will be important for some of the universities on the next slide. And this is to say how many of these seats are reserved for postgraduates. And other fees will include the international students and postgraduates. So on this slide, this is a small selection of the some of the 39 medical universities in UK. So the number of seats in total between universities ranges from 40 seats at Edgehill to up to 490 seats at the University of Manchester. So this is the number of seats that you'd be competing with other students for. And I've also highlighted a selection of some universities. Some notable ones to look at, for example, there is UCLan, University of Central Lancashire. They have 205 seats, but of those, 160 are for international students. So if you apply to UCLan, you're only going to be applying for one of these 45 seats, which makes it a lot more competitive in comparison to another university which may have significantly more seats for home students, like Liverpool or Newcastle. Another university to point out is the University of Sunderland. Sunderland is a relatively new university with a fairly low UCAT cutoff point and a decently sized student cohort, which may be a consideration for some people. So this is a slide that's talking about competition ratios. So why are they important? So the competition ratio is basically saying how many students are applying and how many seats are they applying for. So this is a table I've taken from medschoolgenie.co.uk, and they have an extensive list on the universities and their competition ratios. So for example, for every 10 home applicants to University of Aberdeen, per place, for 10 of them, only one gets a place. So that just shows the competition in Aberdeen, and if you compare to, say, Anglia Ruskin, it's more competitive per seat. There'd be 12 applicants per seat. And then on the left side here is also a competition ratio for interviews. So, for example, for every 10 people that would apply to Anglia Ruskin, 5 of them would have an interview, and maybe one of them will get a place. So that just puts into perspective the competition. So I have a few examples on the next slide here. Here we have Hull York, Manchester, Oxford, and Edgehill. And these are just to show a different range of the competition ratios. So, for example, at Hull York, for every 7 students that apply, there's 1 place. And of those 7, 3 or 4 would have an interview. So about half of the people who'd apply to Hull York will have an interview, but only one in 3 or 4 interviewees will actually have a seat. University of Oxford, there's about 10 applicants per place, and about 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 will be invited to interview. For University of Manchester, this I've taken from their website, so this is for the cohort of 2020 to 2021. 2,800 students applied, and of them about 1,600 were shortlisted for interview, and from those 1,600, about 870 were given offers. So in total, from 2,800 down to 800, that's about 1 seat for every 3 or 4 applicants. So that's showing the competition ratio difference between, say, Manchester and Oxford. And Edgehill University, as I mentioned before, with only 40 seats, there's 27 applicants per place. That's 3 times more competitive than Oxford University. So that's something to consider for Edgehill. So now I'll be talking about a few websites. So this is medschools.ac.uk. They update their guide every year, and they have an extensive list of all the medical schools in UK, including postgraduate and postgraduate entry and foundation year entry as well. And here I've got an example of Edgehill University. So it shows the competition ratio. It shows the different applications. So if you're applying with your A levels, for example, it shows the A-level requirements, what subjects. Later on, it will also tell you how the interview is done and what their work experience, what they expect for work experience. And at the bottom of the page would also be a link. So I'll show this now. So if I go onto this website, and it will open up in Chrome. Here, so this is the medschools.ac.uk site, and here they have a list of the universities like this, and they also have a downloadable PDF here at this link. So if I just open this up, this is the front page, and these are the contents pages. So if I say go to University of Cambridge, page 20, you can just click on the page number. take you, and this shows University of Cambridge. It's a six-year course for MBBR medicine. It shows the competition ratio available on the website for last year. However, you can find more information from other websites. Typical offers are A star, A star, A at A level. They require the BMAT exam. Personal statement is reviewed before interview, but it isn't scored. The interview done is a panel interview. And if you want to find out more, there's a link to the University of Cambridge. So you can click on that, and it will take you to the University of Cambridge page, and you can have a read through there and find out more information. So back to the slides. So next we'll be looking at some of the weightage of scores and grades. So from this we have 6med, which is a website I found recently, which has a couple of links talking about how the universities that score UCAT, how they take the UCAT score, and how the different universities use BMAT. So it'll suggest what to do if you have, say, an excellent UCAT score, if you have a low score, or a really good BMAT score, low BMAT score, etc. The information is given in a short form and is straight to the point, so I have a few example screenshots here. And I'll also just show this website quickly. So if we look at the UCAT score, we'll open up here, and then here is a list of all the UCAT universities. And on this website, they've sorted it into 3 categories. So where to apply if you have a really good UCAT score, like 2800 plus, 2700 plus. If you have an average UCAT score, so around 2400, up to 2700 roughly. And then if you have a low UCAT score. So for example, say you had a low UCAT score. If we look at Cardiff University, here's the slide here. So it says here there's no emphasis on the UCAT with Cardiff. The lowest score they interviewed last year was 1840 in UCAT, and the average score that offer holders had was about 2600. So that just kind of shows some of the different universities that you can apply to depending on your UCAT score, and it's a fairly good resource. So now the question, how to choose which universities to apply to. So by UCAS, you can only apply up to 4 medical schools, and as normally you can only apply to one of Oxford and Cambridge. You can't apply to both Oxford and Cambridge. And when you're considering what university to look at, you need to be rational and you need to consider your circumstances. What are your predicted grades? What is your UCAT score or your BMAT score for the university you're applying to? What were your GCSE grades if the university will look at them and score them as Liverpool does? And these are things that you can consider, and then you can cross-reference your own personal grades and scores against some of the websites I've shown you to consider which universities you'd apply to. A big question people have is what to do with a low UCAT score. So if you have a low UCAT score, you do have a few options. So on the previous website, on 6med, they've mentioned a few universities that have very little emphasis on the UCAT in terms of their admissions. Another thing you can do if you have a low UCAT score is you can consider taking the BMAT. The BMAT is as hard, if not more challenging than the UCAT, so you will need to study hard. And this year the BMAT exam is on the 18th of October, so you have about a month from now to prepare. And taking the BMAT can improve your chance of getting into a university this year if you get a fairly good BMAT score and apply to, say, a low UCAT score university and then some BMAT universities. Another thing that some people do if they do have a low UCAT score is they take a gap year and do something useful with their time, maybe getting work experience in a healthcare profession, or say working as a receptionist, or gaining work experience in some way, or getting some studies done, and then resitting the UCAT for the next admission cycle. So you have a fresh start, you have a new UCAT score, You have your A-level grades from the previous year, and then you can apply as normal. Now, I mentioned before you can only apply to 4 medical schools by UCAS, but UCAS gives you 5 options. So what can you do with your 5th option? So there are a couple different options. So some people may add a different career, so allied health professions as their 5th option, and that will still lead into a medical setting. So for example, podiatry and nursing. Another option is to take a related degree, so you can do biomedical sciences, and then after that you can apply to medicine as a postgraduate in biomedical sciences, or in some courses they may allow some of the highest scoring students to transfer to the medicine program. An extra, if you would want to apply to additional universities, then you can consider a private application. For example, Buckingham University does accept private applications. And then for the final slide, I wanted to just briefly mention the interview and MMI and weightage. So some universities may look at your application holistically. They'll look at your UCAT BMAT score, they'll look at how you did in the interview, they'll look at your predicted grades and your GCSEs. Whereas other universities, for example, I know Liverpool does this, once you reach the invitation for interview stage, then they'll only look at your interview score when they're considering you for a place in the university. So this is something to, another thing to consider, and you can find this information either through searching through the links I've sent or on the university's websites. And then just at the end, I've compiled these links into one slide, so if you want to take a screenshot, or I can send these messages across, send these links across as well for you to look at in your own time. Thank you for listening.